but what is the lived experience of these people who are numbers on a paper to me? Like that is, I think, why we should track. That is why we have data, not just to have it and put a sexy PowerPoint up. What are you doing beyond that? And that's really going to be the differentiator between effective leadership and leadership that is paying lip service.
True. You just pulled the words out of my mouth, because that was my next question. When we look at, based on all the vast experience, collectively, I think you all have got over 60 years of experience between the three of you. So based on your vast experience in diversity and inclusion, do you think leadership and organizations are committed to diversity, or do they just pay lip service? Is HR empowered to have those difficult conversations with their leadership? What do you think, Dina?
Well, I have the future of diversity, equity, inclusion in the 2021 report that was done, and it was listed on like HR.com about maximizing human potential. And they asked that very question. And so I do have some numbers of what was actually being shared about that, is that, among those metrics that are applied and people really doing the work, is that less than 50% actually truly have embedded initiatives, because where they actually begin to spend their money, their time, their energy, their effort is really on the superficial level as opposed to the deeper issues. And then it's one of those touch points like, see, we did it. We checked the box, as opposed to this is who we are. And so and these are the numbers that from I think over 600 that they had in the case study that's there, is that most organizations right now are still somewhere in the intermediate phase of DEI, is that they have awareness of it. They even begin to put things in place like ERGs, but they really truly haven't begun to internalize it as part of the culture and the construct of the organization. And so, there's the balance, and it depends on the sense of urgency. We saw in 2020, particularly in the United States, after the George Floyd situation and Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, there were so many different things that actually went global. And then we saw this race to, we got to put something in place. And it was a knee-jerk reaction to try to take down a systemic issue. So it's almost like kicking a brick wall with a flip-flop.
I like that.
and so what happened is that, we start kicking on this wall with our flip-flops and our toes were hurt. We're like, oh, this isn't working. We tried. Okay, so you know what we're going to do is we're not going to try to break down the wall. We're going to go and we're going to get a ladder and just push it up against the wall and try to climb over it and see what's on the other side. But you never dealt with the wall. You never dealt with the wall. And so I believe that when we look at this from a systems perspective, I'm a systems thinker, right? Because we have to drill back down to what does it take to get from where we are to where we really, truly desire to be. And that it truly, honestly, is a marathon and not a sprint. But this is one of those like mud Spartan races. You're going to have to put on your gear to go through it, because you're going to hit those patches that are tough. And what's happening is that we're ill-equipped collectively. You'll bring in a subject matter expert like myself. You'll have Crystal Moore. You'll have Adrian. They'll say, oh, you guys, you do it. And you have all the answers. And so we don't fully fund the war at all. We actually identify and earmark some dollars for a battle, but we don't fund the war. And so that's really what begins to happen across the board. And so are we truly, from a holistic perspective, from a strategic perspective, has there been some growth? Yes. And so we'll celebrate that. Could there be more, especially if we were more intentional about how we did it and actually took a pause to say, here's what we know. Here's our blind spots and our gaps. Here's where we're starting from. Here's who we need. And this is what it costs to fund it. And now let's begin to take the steps and understand the continuous improvement cycle that we're going to have to really Kaizen this and take a look. Is it working? Oh, let's go ahead and pivot. Oh, let's go switch. Let's go back and look at that. Before we put a program in place, did we test it and measure program for our organization? just that people realize I'm just real passionate about this, because there's a lot of money that was thrown at it, but it literally just fell into the gutter because it wasn't strategic, it wasn't intentional, and it was a knee-jerk reaction to something that truly, honestly takes lots of training.
I could see the passion, Dina, flow through. But talking about investing, let's go to Crystal. Crystal's company has invested 4 million on diversity and inclusion. And so please share your thoughts, Crystal. I'm sure you all have, thought this through to invest that kind of money in eradicating racism. So please share your thoughts.
Yeah, it comes in a lot of different forms. We've upgraded our salaries for our hourly professionals, of which there are about 4,000. We're looking at democratizing access to fitness, which means from a socioeconomic status, we want to enable folks who may not have safe gyms to go to in certain neighborhoods across the world to be able to access fitness. And so we're looking at that from a socioeconomic status. And there's other pillars as well. We've engaged some strategic partnerships with local community organizations to ensure that we're helping to eradicate systemic racism throughout those specific neighborhoods. And then we have active anti-racism learning journeys. Our senior leadership committed to over 90 hours of 9 months of learning with an external facilitator, and it was fantastic. So to have your CEO and the C-suite and top leaders in an organization go through 9 months of strategic, intentional learning around anti-racism is tough, right? You have tough conversations. So to Dina's point, being intentional, being thoughtful, being deliberate, pausing and saying, where did we mess up, or where did we maybe not do right, or are we listening to everyone we should be listening to? Are we skipping over a few folks? Are we listening to hourly folks? Or are we listening just to our corporate friends? So it's really important to be intentional and pause. And the other point that was made earlier about the lived experiences, I did want to just make a comment around some of the things that did happen last summer, and it caused people to listen and lean in a lot more than they ever have and be more empathetic. And I think it's important for people to realize that when you're in the majority, you do not experience the company in ways that others do who have been othered or silenced or marginalized. And when you do hear the lived experiences of those people, that it's important to believe them. Just because it didn't happen to you didn't mean it didn't happen to someone in the company, on your team, under your leadership. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So I think when we think about what leaders can be doing, it's being empathetic and being more intentional and pausing to understand where they may have made mistakes, and to be real thoughtful about how they approach talent decisions and hiring decisions and promotional decisions, because all of the things that have happened have impacted leaders' ability to lead with empathy and lead with intentionality, and to think more strategically about their talent decisions, and not just go to your same go-to people, not go to the folks that that you directly hired and that you directly know, but to really think through holistically about your entire team and bringing others along that maybe you haven't seen perform in the way that you like them to, but then spend more time with them versus going to your usual suspects. So there's just so many different small tactics that can make a huge difference as we think about how we eradicate and break down the barriers to entry for people who have been marginalized and silenced in the past.
Fantastic. I think when you have leadership that is so committed and they're walking their talk, it's definitely going to be translating to every single one down the line. And I think that's so important, because then you have an inclusive organization that all work towards a common objective. And I think that's absolutely amazing. That's really, Aisha, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just, I don't know how to say this without coming off as a little bit too tough. I've been told this. They're like, Aisha, you're very tough on HR. That's because I love HR and I'm a HR nerd and lover and believe that it can make great change. One of the really positive things for me is that these conversations are now cool to have, right? there are a lot of downsides because you will have very surface level, let's just do it for the sake of doing it and it doesn't go deep. But the point is, everybody wants to get on the train. So that for me is a good thing. And then I think it comes to, if you're as lucky as Crystal, where you have this leadership that is like, oh my God, yes, we're going to be serious about this and we're going to show it through this active commitment. That is wonderful. But I will tell you that is rare. So Crystal, amazing. Where does HR fall in? And this is where I really kind of want to poke at this. HR leadership needs to buck up, and they need to have the moral courage to say, we are doing this and we are doing this seriously. And by the way, hey, board, you committed to 1, 2, 3, and it is not fulfilling its true purpose. And I think it's a sad thing that a lot of the companies I've consulted with and been part of, that often doesn't necessarily happen. HR takes this very, will be strategic when it comes to doing the really easy and nice stuff that doesn't have any resistance. And then we'll be very process focused and be a processing center when it comes to the hard stuff, because we'll just say we're busy, but we're achieving our numbers. There needs to be true leadership within HR to make these changes. Otherwise, in my mind, they're not really performing their function. And so I think tactically what has to happen is, if you are an HR leader, you need to think about what are the commitments that your company either has made or needs to make that are going to cause a real change and create a positive environment for everyone, to create this inclusivity that we spoke of, and the sense of belonging. And if you are, a board member, you need to think about, well, these things that I'm committing to, how deep are they going? And those are questions that if you're not constantly, questioning, or conversations that you're not constantly having, then I'm going to question, how legitimate your initiatives are.
Right. I know we could talk on D&I for hours and hours, but you're running out of time. So our final question, very quickly, what advice would you give organizations who are early starters on D&I, or those who have already have a D&I culture, and how can they get better? What is it that they can do to have a true D&I structure within their organizations? Who wants to start?
I can start. I can just say,
okay, go ahead.
Embedded into everything that you do. It's not an HR program. It's a leadership capability. Enable leaders to carry out the culture and then create the inclusive culture and the belongingness and the engagement. I think it needs to be embedded into business processes, how you look at merger and acquisitions, how you go to market. It's truly not just an employee life cycle opportunity. If it's embedded into everything you do, the imagery, the ads that are on TV, the faces that you see, then it can be a game changer in sales and revenue and hit the bottom line. It can be a game changer in attracting talent. So my biggest advice is to make sure it's embedded into everything, that it's appropriately structured, that it's appropriately budgeted, that you don't hire one person and say, go for it, that you give that person a team and the empowerment and the resources that they need to do a great job. And it truly can make a difference.
Fantastic. Dina, what are your thoughts? Very quickly, please.
Yeah, my thoughts is really getting to the heart of the why, and that should align pretty much what Crystal said to your mission, vision, and your overall values. This is not what we're doing. This is who we are. And when we're talking about, talent and true diversity, is that don't hire people for diversity and then train them and assimilate them into a culture that really begins to mute their diversity. So really getting to the root of it as to the why, because really DEI is the foundation. It's the building blocks to innovation and excellence within your organization.
Fantastic. Aisha, your final thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm just going to add, they said it perfectly. I think the important thing is, you have to start somewhere. And if it is, I'm going to start looking at these very simplistic forms of diversity and inclusion, please go ahead. But continue on that journey and continue to diversify it and also make partnerships. As Crystal said, this could be something in your sales organization, anywhere else. HR is the custodian of culture for sure, but they need to diversify and ensure that customers are experiencing it, the internal organization, the external perception, it all has to be baked in.
Right. And I think recognizing that diversity and inclusion are two different areas and pillars. And I think taking that first step of knowing the difference is creating a uniquely diverse and inclusive culture, right? So we have time for just one question for all of you. And let me start. We've got many questions, but I'll take one. How can we improve the employee experience through diversity? Aisha.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Just to give you a short little answer, I think the way that you improve the experience is by creating this sense of belonging, because you see other people who potentially have your same lived experience, and so you know what is possible. A quick story I'm going to give you, just 2 seconds. My son came back from school one day and he was taught the story of Ruby Bridges, and when he came home, he told me, he said, "Mommy, Ruby Bridges was just a little girl and she did really good things. Can I do good things too? Because I'm a kid too." So he saw representation of himself in this other child's story. And so having that representation in your organization is one of the magical things that diversity brings. So yeah, absolutely. It'll totally change their experience.
Fantastic. Crystal, I think when it comes to representation, I think Crystal is a great organization that is starting with representation from their leadership. So Crystal, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that, creating the social and psychological safety so that every single person from every facet and every dimension of diversity has the opportunity to feel like they belong and to maximize their full potential. So if you have a janitor running an organization, they feel like they belong. The secretary, the administrative assistant, all the way to the senior level executive, there's a sense of safety, psychological safety, where they feel like they can be heard and seen and valued and make an impact. We can do that for every single person that walks in our walls, and or regardless of where they work. They will have an employee experience which will create the engagement and the culture that the organization is looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dina, your final thoughts on it, please.
Well, it's really getting back to putting the human back into HR, because it actually begins in the process. So providing access from the very front end. Did you have a humane experience and even being brought on? So you have to look at the whole talent life cycle as a whole, and their onboarding and that sense of inclusion that is there. And so it's pretty much been, stated already what we need to do, but people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that really gets back to the heart of DEI, is really understanding the human factor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Amazing insights. What a joy it has been with you all three beautiful women championing the cause of D&I. Keep going, keep shining. And we will see a lot more of you in our future events. So thank you, Aisha. Thank you,
Helen.
Crystal. Thank you, Dina.
Crystal. So good to see you guys again.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day.
Take care.
And see you soon. Keep in touch.